The 63-year-old widow sat in the dirt beside a horse trough with $17 to her name and nowhere left to go. Everyone she'd ever loved was dead. The frontier town of Red Hollow moved around her like she didn't exist, just another broken soul the Arizona Territory had chewed up and spit out. Then a stranger walked toward her through the dust. What he asked her that night made no sense. It broke every rule. But when you've got nothing left to lose, sometimes the craziest answer is the only one that matters. Watch until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Ishulayan. The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside Miller's General Store, and Evelyn Harper didn't move. Her hand stayed locked around the handle of her carpet bag like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Through the dust-caked window, she could see Red Hollow spread out under a merciless June sun. Wooden buildings that looked like they'd been thrown together by men too tired or too drunk to care, a wide dirt street churned into powder by wagon wheels and horse hooves, and people moving with that particular kind of purpose you only found in places where stopping meant dying. "Ma'am?" The driver's voice came from somewhere above her. "This is your stop." Evelyn turned her head slowly. The young man was looking at her with the kind of polite impatience reserved for old women who took too long doing simple things. He probably thought she was confused. Maybe she was. "Red Hollow," she said. Her voice came out dry and cracked. "This is Red Hollow." "Yes, ma'am. Been Red Hollow for the last 6 hours. You've been sleeping." She hadn't been sleeping. She'd been sitting with her eyes closed, trying to remember what her sister Margaret's laugh sounded like. It had only been 3 weeks since the fever took her, but already the sound was fading. Just like Thomas's voice had faded 2 years after the mine accident. Just like Samuel's had disappeared in the 4 years since consumption hollowed him out in that Philadelphia boarding house. Her husband, her son, her sister, all gone. And here she was in Red Hollow, Arizona Territory. Because Margaret's last letter had said, "Come stay with me," and Evelyn had already sold everything she owned to buy the ticket before the second letter arrived. The one from Margaret's neighbor explaining that Margaret was dead, and there was no one here waiting for her after all. "Ma'am, I got a schedule." Evelyn stood up. Her knees popped. Her back ached. 63 years of living felt like 163 as she gathered her carpet bag and made her way to the door. The driver offered his hand and she took it, hating how much she needed it, hating the way he had to practically lift her down to the street because her legs had gone stiff from sitting. The heat hit her like a wall. Philadelphia had been warm when she left, but this was different. This was heat with weight to it, heat that pressed down on your skull and squeezed the moisture out of your skin. The sun sat white and vicious in a sky so blue it hurt to look at. "Your trunk, ma'am." The driver hauled her small trunk down from the luggage rack and set it in the dust beside her. That was it, everything she owned, one trunk and one carpet bag and $17 in a cloth purse tucked inside her dress pocket. "Is there—" She looked up and down the street. "Is there a boarding house, somewhere to stay?" The driver glanced at her, then away. "Mabel's place, 2 streets over past the saloon, can't miss it." He didn't offer to help with the trunk. He climbed back up onto his seat, released the brake, and snapped the reins. The stagecoach rolled away in a cloud of dust that stuck to Evelyn's sweating face and made her eyes water. She stood there for a long moment, looking at her trunk. It wasn't heavy. There wasn't much inside except dresses worn thin from washing and a few things she couldn't bear to sell. But dragging it 2 streets in this heat felt impossible. A man walked past without looking at her. Then 2 women in bonnets talking to each other in low voices. A Mexican boy leading a mule. None of them slowed down. None of them asked if she needed help. Evelyn bent down, got her hands under the trunk, and lifted. Pain shot through her lower back, but she ignored it. She made it maybe 20 feet before she had to set it down again. Her heart was hammering. Sweat ran down her spine. She looked up. The street stretched out forever. The sun pressed down. The town kept moving around her like water around a stone. This is how it ends, she thought. This is what's left. She picked up the trunk again. 10 more feet, rest. 10 more feet, rest. Her vision started to blur at the edges. A younger woman would have cried, but Evelyn had used up all her tears burying the people she loved. What came out of her now wasn't crying. It was just breathing that hurt. The boarding house was worse than she'd imagined. Mabel turned out to be a hard-faced woman in her 40s who looked at Evelyn's worn dress and small trunk and quoted a price of $4 a week for a room the size of a closet with a cot that sagged in the middle and a window that wouldn't open. In advance, Mabel added. Evelyn counted out $4 from her purse and handed it over. Mabel took it without comment and pointed down a dark hallway. Last door on the right. Privy's out back. Breakfast at 6 if you want it costs extra. No cooking in the rooms. No visitors after 8. The room was exactly as bad as it looked from the doorway. Evelyn set down her trunk and carpet bag and sat on the cot. The ropes creaked under her weight. There was a smell of old wood and older sweat. A brown stain spread across one corner of the ceiling where rain had leaked through. She sat there for a long time, not thinking about anything in particular. Just sitting. Outside, the sounds of Red Hollow went on. Horses, voices, a dog barking, someone hammering something. The sounds of life continuing whether you were part of it or not. When the light started to change, going from white to gold, Evelyn stood up. She washed her face in the basin on the dresser, using water from a pitcher that had a crack running down one side. She smoothed her hair. She looked at herself in the spotted mirror and saw an old woman looking back. When had that happened? When had the woman she used to be disappeared? She went outside. Red Hollow was quieter now. The brutal heat was fading into something merely uncomfortable. Men were finishing work, heading toward the saloon. A few women stood talking outside the mercantile. Evelyn walked slowly down the street, not going anywhere in particular, just moving because sitting still in that room felt like giving up. She found herself at the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open land. There was a water trough here, built beside the road for travelers. A cottonwood tree that might have been 100 years old. A wooden bench that looked like it had been made from scrap lumber. Evelyn sat down on the bench. Then she slid down to the ground beside the trough. Because the ground felt more honest somehow. The earth was hard and warm and didn't pretend to be comfortable. She leaned back against the trough and looked out at the desert. The mountains in the distance were turning purple. The sky was going pink and orange. It was beautiful in a harsh kind of way. The kind of beauty that didn't care whether you appreciated it or not. This is where I die, she thought. Not today, maybe not even this year, but soon. In that awful room, alone, and they'd bury her in ground so hard it would probably take 2 men most of a day to dig the hole. She wasn't afraid exactly. She'd stopped being afraid of death when Samuel died. After that, it was just a thing that would happen, like weather. But she was tired, so tired, and the loneliness was worse than the dying would be. She didn't hear the horse until it was close. When she looked up, the sky had gone from pink to deep blue, and the first stars were starting to show. A man was dismounting from a big roan gelding maybe 20 feet away, moving with the stiff, careful way of someone who'd spent too many hours in the saddle. He was old, 70, maybe older, tall and thin like a fence post, wearing dusty range clothes and a hat that had seen better decades. His face was all angles and weathered skin, the kind of face you got from living outside. When he noticed her sitting there in the dirt, he stopped. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then he tied his horse to the hitching rail and walked over. Not fast, not slow, just walking. He stopped a respectful distance away, took off his hat, and held it in both hands. "Evening, ma'am." His voice was rough, like gravel rolling around in a bucket. "Evening," Evelyn said. He stood there, turning his hat in his hands. "You waiting for someone?" "No." "You hurt?" "No." "Lost?" Evelyn almost laughed. "Yes, I suppose I am." The old man shifted his weight from one leg to the other. He had pale eyes, blue or gray, hard to tell in the fading light. They were looking at her with something that might have been recognition. "You just come in on the stage?" "This afternoon." "Got people here?" "No, they're dead." He nodded like this made perfect sense. "You got a place to stay?" "Mabel's boarding house. That's a hard place." He said it matter-of-factly, the way you'd comment on the weather. Then he put his hat back on and stood there some more, like he was trying to work out a problem in his head. Evelyn waited. She was too tired to be curious, too tired to wonder what this stranger wanted or why he was still standing there. Finally, he spoke. "My name's Caleb Mercer. I got a ranch about 8 miles north of here. Been running cattle on it for near 40 years. "That's nice," Evelyn said, because she couldn't think of what else to say. I lost my wife 11 years ago. Cancer. Took her slow. He said it without emotion, just stating facts. Got no children, no family left at all. It's just me out there now. Evelyn nodded. She understood that kind of alone. Caleb cleared his throat. I come into town maybe once a month for supplies. Rest of the time, it's just me and the work. Got a foreman, Luis, good man. But he's got his own place, his own family. When the day's done, I go back to a house that ain't had a woman's touch in over a decade. Ain't had a voice in it except mine. Ain't had... He trailed off, looking out at the darkening desert. Ain't had much of anything, truth be told. I'm sorry, Evelyn said quietly. Don't be. He looked back at her. I'm telling you this because I saw you sitting here and I recognized something. You got that same look I see in my mirror every morning, like you're still breathing but you already died somewhere along the way. Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking. It was already broken. Just shifting. That's a terrible thing to say to someone. Yes, ma'am, it is. But it's true, ain't it? She didn't answer. Caleb took a breath. I'm going to ask you something now, and I want you to know I ain't drunk and I ain't simple in the head. I know it's going to sound like both those things, but I'm asking anyway because I'm too old and too tired to keep dancing around what needs saying. All right, Evelyn said. Would you consider marrying me? The question hung in the air between them like something physical. Evelyn stared at him. He stared back, his weathered face completely serious. You're insane, she finally said. Probably, but I'm also honest. I'm offering you a home. A real one, not a room at Mabel's. I'm offering you decent meals and a roof that don't leak and a place where you won't be alone. He paused. And I'm asking for the same in return. I don't want a nursemaid. I can take care of myself. I don't want... He cleared his throat again. I ain't asking for wifely duties if that's what you're worried about. I'm too old and too tired for that. I'm just asking for someone to sit across from at supper. Someone to talk to when the silence gets too loud. Someone to share the weight of being alive when it gets too heavy to carry alone. You don't know me, Evelyn said. I don't know you. We're strangers. That's true. But we ain't young and stupid enough to confuse knowing someone with loving them. I love my wife. She's gone. You loved your people. They're gone. Maybe what we need now ain't love. Maybe it's just company. Evelyn pressed her hand against the warm wood of the water trough. Her heart was beating fast and her thoughts were spinning. This was madness. Complete madness. You didn't marry a stranger just because you were both lonely. You didn't make life decisions sitting in the dirt at sunset with a man you'd known for 5 minutes. Except she had $13 left. $13 meant 3 more weeks at Mabel's if she didn't eat much. After that, what? She was too old to work. Too old to start over. Too old for anyone to want her for anything. Why me? She asked. Why not some younger woman who could actually help you run that ranch? But because a younger woman would want things I can't give, would expect things, would have dreams left. He looked at her steadily. We're past dreams, you and me. We're in the part that comes after. Might as well walk through it together instead of alone. This is crazy. Yes, ma'am. We could hate each other. We could, but we'd hate each other in a house that's warm in winter with food on the table. That's better than hating the world by yourself in a room at Mabel's. Evelyn closed her eyes. She thought about that room, about the sagging cot and the brown stain on the ceiling, about waking up every morning to another day of nothing, about the silence that would slowly squeeze the life out of her until she was just a body still moving around, waiting for everything to stop. She opened her eyes. What would people say? Caleb made a sound that might have been a laugh. People in Red Hollow got enough troubles without worrying about 2 old folks trying not to die alone. And even if they do talk, so what? You planning on making friends at church socials? No, me neither. He shifted his hat. I ain't saying it'll be easy. Ranch life's hard. The house needs work. Winter's bitter out there. But it's honest work and honest living, and at the end of the day, there'd be 2 of us instead of 1. That's all I'm offering. That and my word that I'll treat you with respect and do my best not to be too much of a burden. The sky was almost full dark now. Stars were coming out in numbers Evelyn had never seen in Philadelphia. The desert had gone quiet except for the sound of wind moving through dry grass. She thought about Samuel, her husband, about how they'd met at a church social when she was 19 and he was 23, about how proper it had all been, calling hours and chaperoned walks and her father's approval before he could even hold her hand, about the wedding with both families there and the white dress her mother had sewn. That was a lifetime ago. That girl in the white dress was gone. The world that girl lived in was gone. Maybe Caleb was right. Maybe what came after dreams was just the practical business of getting through days without breaking. "I need to think about it," she said. "Of course." He stepped back. "I'll be at the Grand Hotel tonight, leaving tomorrow around noon. If you decide yes, come find me before then. If not," he put his hat back on. "If not, I hope things work out for you, ma'am. I truly do." He walked back to his horse, untied it, and led it down the street toward what Evelyn assumed was the hotel. She watched him go, this strange old man who'd just proposed marriage to a woman he'd met 5 minutes ago. She sat there until the stars were thick overhead and her back was aching from the hard ground. Then she stood up slowly, brushed the dust off her dress, and walked back to Mabel's boarding house. The room looked even worse in lamplight. The walls seemed to close in. The air smelled stale and used up. Evelyn sat on the cot and tried to think rationally about what had just happened. The rational thing was to say no. The rational thing was to find work somehow, maybe cleaning houses or taking in washing. The rational thing was to build some kind of life here in Red Hollow on her own terms, even if it was hard. But when she really looked at it, there was no rational path forward. She was too old, too tired, too broke. The world didn't have space for old widows with nothing to offer. She lay down on the cot and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. She just lay there, listening to the sounds of the boarding house. Someone coughing in another room, footsteps on the stairs, voices through thin walls. Around midnight, she sat up. She lit the lamp and opened her carpet bag. At the bottom, wrapped in an old shawl, was the tintype photograph of Samuel and young Thomas, taken maybe 30 years ago. Samuel looked so serious in it, like he was afraid moving would break something. Thomas was maybe 7, trying not to smile. "What should I do?" she whispered to the photograph. The photograph didn't answer. Dead people never did, no matter how much you needed them to. But as she sat there holding it, she realized Samuel wouldn't have wanted her to die alone in a place like this. He'd been a practical man. A good man, but practical. He'd have said, "Take the offer, take the home, take the company. You don't get second chances at our age, Evelyn. You take what comes." She wrapped the photograph back up and tucked it away. Then she lay back down, and this time, finally, sleep came. Morning arrived too early and too hot. Evelyn washed her face in the cracked pitcher, put on her best dress, which was really just her least worn dress, and tried to make herself look presentable. Her hands shook as she pinned up her hair. By 9 o'clock, she couldn't stand the waiting anymore. She left her trunk and most of her things at Mabel's and walked through Red Hollow, carrying just her carpet bag. The Grand Hotel turned out to be neither grand nor particularly hotel-like, but it had a front desk where a bored-looking clerk told her Caleb Mercer was in room 7. She climbed the stairs slowly, her heart hammering. At room 7, she stood for a long moment with her hand raised to knock. This was insane. This was the kind of decision desperate people made, and it never ended well. She knocked anyway. Caleb opened the door almost immediately, like he'd been standing right there waiting. He was dressed the same as last night, but he'd shaved and his hair was damp like he'd washed it. He looked at her, then at the carpet bag in her hand. "Yes or no?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Evelyn said, "but I have conditions." He stepped back to let her in. The room was small and plain, but cleaner than her room at Mabel's. "What conditions?" "I want my own space in the house, a room where I can go when I need to be alone." "You can have the whole upstairs if you want it. I sleep downstairs anyway." "I'm not a cook. I can make basic meals, but nothing fancy. I've been eating my own cooking for 11 years. Anything you make will be an improvement. If I'm unhappy, if this isn't working, I want the right to leave. I want your word you won't try to stop me." Caleb nodded slowly. "You got it, but the same goes for me. We're both free to walk away if it gets to be too much. And no physical expectations. You said that last night, but I need to hear it again. No expectations." He said it firmly, looking her straight in the eye. "We're two people sharing a house and helping each other get through days, that's all." Evelyn set down her carpet bag. "Then yes. My answer is yes." Something shifted in Caleb's weathered face. Not quite a smile, but a softening. All right then. We'll need to find someone to marry us. There's a minister here, Reverend Matthews. Got a little church on the east side of town. How soon? Soon as he'll do it, I expect. No point in waiting around. They walked through Red Hollow together, this odd pair of old strangers who'd decided to tie their fading lives together. People stared. Let them stare. Evelyn was beyond caring what people thought. Reverend Matthews turned out to be a thin man in his 50s with kind eyes and a way of talking that suggested he'd seen enough of life not to be surprised by much. When Caleb explained what they wanted, the Reverend studied them both carefully. You two know each other long? Met last night, Caleb said. I see. The Reverend folded his hands. And you're both certain this is what you want? We're old, not simple, Evelyn said. We know what we're doing. The Reverend smiled slightly. Fair enough. I suppose at your age you've earned the right to make your own choices without a lecture from me. When did you want to do this? Today, Caleb said. Today. The Reverend sighed. All right, come back at 3 o'clock. I'll need 2 witnesses. Do you have anyone? My foreman can ride in, Caleb said. Luis Ortega. Good man. I'll ask my wife to stand witness as well. The Reverend looked at Evelyn. You're sure about this, ma'am? Evelyn thought about the boarding house, about the $17, about dying alone in a place where nobody knew her name. I'm sure, she said. They were married at 3 o'clock in a church that smelled of old wood and candle wax. Luis Ortega showed up dusty from riding, looking confused but willing. The Reverend's wife was a plump woman who smiled encouragingly and held Evelyn's carpet bag during the brief ceremony. Caleb's voice was steady when he said his vows. Evelyn shook slightly, but she got through them. The Reverend pronounced them married, and that was that. No reception, no family gathering, just 4 witnesses to the strangest decision either of them had ever made. Luis clapped Caleb on the shoulder. Boss, you full of surprises. Getting too old for surprises, Caleb said. This is just practical. They collected Evelyn's trunk from Mabel's, loaded it into Caleb's wagon along with supplies he'd bought that morning, and left Red Hollow behind. Evelyn sat on the wagon bench beside her new husband and watched the town disappear behind them in a cloud of dust. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. What was there to say? They'd already said everything that mattered. The ranch appeared gradually as they drove north. First just a break in the endless desert, then fence posts, then cattle scattered across brown grass, then finally the house itself. It was a low adobe structure with a wooden porch, set against a backdrop of red rock formations that looked like they'd been there since the world began. Caleb pulled the wagon up to the house and set the brake. Well, here it is. Evelyn climbed down without waiting for help. Her legs were stiff from the ride. She looked at the house, at the dusty windows and the porch that sagged slightly on one end. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had this morning. It needs work, Caleb said, like he was apologizing. Everything needs work. Evelyn picked up her carpet bag. Show me inside. The interior was dim and cluttered, furniture that hadn't been moved in years, dust on every surface, a kitchen that looked like it had been used by someone who didn't care about cooking. But the bones were good. Thick walls, solid floors, a fireplace big enough to heat the whole main room. Upstairs is 2 bedrooms, Caleb said. You can take your pick. I've been sleeping down here since Martha passed. Bad knees. Stairs got to be too much. Evelyn climbed the stairs slowly. The first bedroom was clearly the one Caleb had shared with his wife. There was a big bed with a faded quilt, a dresser with a mirror, windows that looked out toward the mountains. The second bedroom was smaller, simpler. A single bed, a chair, a small table. She chose the smaller room. It felt more honest somehow. When she came back downstairs, Caleb was standing in the kitchen looking lost. I should probably start supper, he said. I'll do it. Evelyn set down her bag. You said anything I make would be an improvement. Let's see if that's true. She found beans and salt pork and made something that was more edible than good. They ate at the kitchen table without talking much. Caleb had table manners, which surprised her a little. He didn't wolf his food, didn't talk with his mouth full. After supper, he showed her around the rest of the house, the washroom, the pantry, where he kept tools and supplies. It was all very practical and businesslike, like they were business partners instead of married people. When dark came, Caleb lit lamps and they sat in the main room. Evelyn found herself exhausted, not from physical work, but from the sheer weight of everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. "I'm going to bed," she said finally. "All right." Caleb stood up. "If you need anything, I'll be down here." She climbed the stairs to the small bedroom and closed the door. The bed was plain but clean. She undressed to her shift, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. She was married, again, to a stranger. Living in a house in the middle of nowhere with a man she'd met yesterday. It was completely insane. But as she lay there, she realized something. For the first time in months, maybe years, she wasn't wondering how she was going to survive tomorrow. She had a roof over her head, food in the kitchen, a place to be that wasn't a room at Mabel's boarding house. It wasn't much, but it was something. She fell asleep to the sound of wind moving across the desert and didn't dream at all. The first morning, Evelyn woke to the sound of roosters and had no idea where she was. The ceiling was wrong. The light coming through the window was wrong. Everything smelled like dust and old wood and something she couldn't quite place. Leather, maybe, or sage. Then she remembered. She was married. She was on a ranch. She was Mrs. Caleb Mercer now, which was absurd because she'd been Mrs. Samuel Harper for 42 years, and you didn't just stop being one person and become another overnight. Except apparently you did. She got dressed slowly, her joints stiff from the unfamiliar bed. Through the window she could see the sun just starting to turn the mountains pink. It was early, earlier than she'd woken in years. But there were sounds coming from downstairs, so Caleb was already up. When she came down, she found him in the kitchen with coffee already made. He was standing at the counter eating something that looked like hardtack, staring out the window at nothing. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Morning?" "Coffee's on the stove, cups in the cabinet there." He pointed with the hardtack. "I'm heading out to check the north fence line. Luis will be by around 8. You need anything before I go?" "No." "All right then." He grabbed his hat from a hook by the door and left. Just like that. No good morning kiss, no small talk, no pretending this was anything other than what it was. Two people sharing a house. Evelyn poured herself coffee and sat at the table. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint and tasted like it had been made sometime yesterday, but it was hot and it was there. She looked around the kitchen in the growing light. It was worse than she'd thought last night. Grease coated the stove. Dishes were piled in the dry sink. The floor hadn't been swept in what looked like weeks. On the counter was a loaf of bread so hard you could probably use it for a doorstop. Well, if she was going to be here, she might as well make herself useful. She spent the morning cleaning. Not because Caleb expected it, and not because she wanted to be some kind of dutiful wife. She cleaned because the dirt bothered her, and because sitting still made her think too much. By noon, the kitchen looked almost habitable. The dishes were washed and put away. The floor was swept. The stove was scrubbed clean. She was washing the windows when someone knocked on the door. The man standing on the porch was Mexican, maybe 50, with a weathered face and kind eyes. He took off his hat when he saw her. "Senora Mercer?" It took her a second to realize he meant her. "Yes. I am Luis Ortega. I work for Mr. Mercer. I was at the wedding yesterday." "I remember." Luis shifted his weight. "I just want to say, welcome. It's good that the boss has company now. He has been alone too long." "Thank you," Evelyn said, because she didn't know what else to say. "If you need anything, my family lives in the foreman's house. It's just over the hill there." He pointed. "My wife Rosa, she would be happy to help you settle in. She speaks good English, better than me." "That's kind of you." Luis nodded, put his hat back on, and headed toward the barn. Evelyn watched him go, feeling strange. She had neighbors now, sort of. People who knew she existed. Caleb came back as the sun was starting to drop. He was covered in dust and looked tired in a way that went deeper than one day's work. He stopped in the doorway of the kitchen and stared. "You cleaned." Floor was filthy. Yeah, it was. He took off his hat and hung it up. "You didn't have to do that." "I didn't do it for you. I did it because I couldn't stand looking at it anymore." She was surprised by how sharp her voice came out, but Caleb just nodded. "Fair enough." He He went to the sink and washed his hands and face. I appreciate it anyway. Supper was beans again, but Evelyn had found some dried chilies and an onion and made it better than last night. They ate in silence. When Caleb finished, he carried his plate to the sink and washed it himself. "You don't have to do that," Evelyn said. "If you're cooking, least I can do is clean up after myself." He dried the plate and put it away. "I ain't looking for a servant, Mrs. Harper. Mrs. Mercer. Sorry, still getting used to that." "Me too." They stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then Caleb cleared his throat. "I usually read for a bit before bed. Got some books in the other room if you want something to do." The books turned out to be an odd collection. Some dime novels, a few agricultural guides, and surprisingly, a worn copy of Shakespeare's plays. Evelyn picked up the Shakespeare and carried it to the chair by the lamp. Caleb settled into another chair with one of the agricultural guides. For an hour, they sat there reading in silence. It should have been comfortable, but it wasn't. The silence felt heavy, like something was pressing down on both of them. Finally, Evelyn closed her book. "This is strange." Caleb looked up. "What is?" "This. All of it. Sitting here pretending this is normal. You want to talk about it?" "I don't know what I want." Evelyn set the book aside. "Yesterday I was alone. Today I'm married. My brain hasn't caught up yet." Caleb closed his own book. "Yeah, I know what you mean." He was quiet for a moment. "You regretting it already?" "I don't know." "Are you?" "No. House feels different with someone in it. Better, different." He rubbed his face. "But I ain't gonna pretend it's not weird. We're strangers trying to act like we belong in each other's lives. So what do we do about it? I guess we just keep going until it stops feeling so strange, or until one of us decides it ain't working." He stood up. "I'm heading to bed. You need anything before I go?" "No." He nodded and headed toward his room off the kitchen. Evelyn sat there a while longer, listening to the sounds of him settling in for the night, boots dropping on the floor, the creak of bed ropes, a cough. She climbed the stairs to her own room and got ready for bed. Through the window, she could see stars so thick they looked like someone had spilled salt across the sky. In Philadelphia, you barely saw stars. Here, they were everywhere. She lay down and closed her eyes. Sleep was a long time coming. The days started to form a pattern. Caleb would be up before dawn, gone to work somewhere on the ranch. Evelyn would wake, make coffee, find something to clean or fix or organize. Around midday, Caleb might come back for a quick meal, might not. Supper they ate together. Evenings they spent reading or sitting on the porch. Then bed. They were polite to each other, careful, like two people walking around something breakable in the middle of the room. After a week, Rosa Ortega knocked on the door carrying a basket covered with a cloth. She was a small woman with graying hair and a smile that came easy. "Senora Mercer, I am Rosa, Luis's wife. Please call me Evelyn." "Evelyn," Rosa held out the basket. "I bring you some things, bread, some tamales. I think maybe you still getting settled and don't have time to cook much." The kindness of it hit Evelyn unexpected and hard. She had to swallow before she could speak. "Thank you. That's very thoughtful." "Is nothing." Rosa's smile dimmed a little. "I remember when Mr. Mercer's first wife passed away. It was very sad. The house, it died too, you know? No life in it anymore, but now..." She looked past Evelyn into the kitchen. "Now maybe it comes back." "I'm not sure I'm the one to bring it back," Evelyn said quietly. "I'm just trying to figure out how to be here." "That is how everything starts, just being somewhere." Rosa patted her arm. "You need anything, you come find me. I'm happy to help." After Rosa left, Evelyn sat at the table and ate one of the tamales. It was good, better than anything she'd eaten in months. She cried a little while she ate, though she couldn't have said exactly why. That evening, when Caleb came in for supper, she served him the tamales. Rosa brought these by. He took a bite and something in his face softened. "She's a good woman. Her and Luis both. They stuck by me when..." He trailed off. "When your wife died?" "Yeah." He took another bite. "Martha got sick slow. Took almost 2 years. Rosa helped take care of her toward the end when I couldn't do it all myself. Luis kept the ranch running when I was too broken up to think straight." It was the most personal thing he'd said since they got married. Evelyn sat down across from him. What was she like? Your wife? Caleb was quiet for a long time. She was tough. Had to be, living out here. But she was soft too, in ways that mattered. She could make anything grow, had a garden that was the pride of the whole territory. Loved to sing while she worked, even though she couldn't carry a tune worth a damn. He smiled a little at the memory. We were married 41 years, met when we were both young and stupid. Figured we'd have 100 years together. Turns out you don't get to pick how long you get. No, Evelyn said. You don't. What about you? Your husband? Evelyn hadn't talked about Samuel in so long it felt strange to start. He was a carpenter, good one, made furniture that people kept for generations. He was quiet, steady, the kind of man you could depend on. She looked down at her hands. He died in a mine accident. Wasn't even supposed to be there. He'd gone to help a friend fix some support beams. The whole thing collapsed. They brought him home in a wagon. How long ago? 15 years. Caleb nodded slowly. And your son? Thomas. He died 4 years after his father. Got sick in Philadelphia, some kind of lung disease. The doctors couldn't do anything. I watched him waste away for 6 months. Her voice was flat, reciting facts. After that, it was just me. Then my sister Margaret wrote and said, come to Arizona. So I did. And then she died before I got here. That's a lot of losing. Yes. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the sun was going down and the desert was turning purple. I don't know what we're doing here, Evelyn said finally. This arrangement we made. I don't know if it's going to work. Me neither, Caleb admitted. But I'll tell you what I do know. I'd rather figure it out with you here than go back to being alone in this house. That's worth something. Is it? I think so. He stood up and carried his plate to the sink. But you tell me if you feel different. Door ain't locked. You can leave whenever you want. After he went to bed, Evelyn sat on the porch and looked at the stars. She thought about leaving, about going back to Red Hollow, finding some kind of work, scraping by. It would be hard, but it would be hers, her choice, her life. But the thought of that room at Mabel's, of the loneliness pressing in from all sides, made her chest tight. She went inside and locked the door for the night. The second week, a problem came up with the cattle. Some kind of disease moving through the herd. Caleb was gone from before dawn until after dark, coming home exhausted and worried. Louise spent every day helping him separate sick animals, checking the rest, trying to stop the spread. Evelyn found herself making extra food and carrying it out to where they were working. It seemed like the least she could do. The first time she showed up with a basket of sandwiches and a jar of water, Caleb looked surprised. You didn't have to come all the way out here? You need to eat. Louise grinned. See, boss? It's good to have a wife. Caleb shot him a look but didn't argue. They ate quickly, barely stopping work. Evelyn watched them for a few minutes, the way they moved around the cattle, the unspoken communication between them. They'd been working together so long they didn't need words. On the way back to the house, she passed the foreman's house and saw Rosa hanging laundry. Rosa waved her over. How you doing? Rosa asked. I'm all right. You look tired. So does everyone. This thing with the cattle? Yes, is bad. Rosa pinned up a shirt. But Caleb, he is good rancher. He will figure it out. She glanced at Evelyn. You settling in? Getting used to the house? I suppose. It still doesn't feel like mine. Give it time. A house becomes yours when you put yourself into it. Not just cleaning, though the kitchen looks much better now, but when you make it fit who you are. I don't know who I am anymore, Evelyn said, surprised by her own honesty. Rosa smiled. Then maybe this is your chance to figure it out. That night Caleb came in looking worse than Evelyn had ever seen him. His face was gray and he was moving like every step hurt. Lost 3 more head, he said, dropping into a chair. Can't figure out what's causing it. Vet's supposed to come tomorrow. Evelyn heated water and made him wash up, then served him supper. He ate mechanically, barely tasting it. You should rest, she said. Can't. Gotta be up early. You're going to make yourself sick. Cattle don't care if I'm sick. But his voice was rough, and she could see the worry eating at him. After supper, he didn't even pretend to read. He just sat staring at nothing, his jaw tight. Evelyn made a decision. She went upstairs, got a blanket, and came back down. Go to bed. In a minute. Now, you're dead on your feet." He looked at her, too tired to argue. "Yes, ma'am." After he'd gone to his room, Evelyn made herself a bed on the sofa in the main room. She wasn't sure why. It wasn't like Caleb needed watching over, but somehow it felt wrong to be upstairs sleeping while he was down here carrying this weight. Around 2 in the morning, she heard him get up. She listened to him moving around in the kitchen, the clink of a glass. Then, his voice, quiet. "You awake?" "Yes." He appeared in the doorway, just a shape in the darkness. "What are you doing down here?" "Couldn't sleep." A long pause. Then, "Thank you for bringing food out today. He trailed off. "It's fine." "No, it ain't fine. You didn't sign up to be a rancher's wife. You signed up for a roof and meals. You're doing more than you need to." "So are you," Evelyn said. "You didn't have to marry a stranger just to give her a place to stay. You could have let me figure it out on my own. Would have been the sensible thing." "Neither of us has been very sensible lately." She heard what might have been a laugh. "No, I suppose not." Another pause. "Good night, Evelyn." It was the first time he'd used her first name. She wasn't sure what that meant, but something about it felt important. "Good night, Caleb." The vet came the next day and confirmed what Caleb had feared: blackleg disease. They'd have to vaccinate the whole herd and keep watch for more cases. It was going to be expensive and time-consuming, and there was no guarantee they'd save all the animals. Caleb took the news with a stone face, but Evelyn saw the tension in his shoulders. This was his livelihood. Losing too many cattle could mean losing the ranch. That evening, he sat at the table going over accounts, his face getting grimmer as the numbers added up. Finally, he shoved the papers away. "Might have to sell off some land." "Is it that bad?" "Getting there." He rubbed his eyes. "I got some savings, but vaccinating the whole herd, replacing the ones we lost, it adds up quick." Evelyn thought about the money in her purse upstairs. $13. It wouldn't make a dent in what he needed, but it was something. She went upstairs and got it. When she came back down and set it on the table in front of him, he stared at it. "What's this?" "It's what I have left. It's not much, but—" "No." He pushed it back toward her. "That's yours." "I don't need it. I have a roof over my head and food to eat. That's what I needed." "Evelyn, take it. Let me contribute something." They looked at each other across the table. Finally, Caleb picked up the money and counted it slowly. $13. That's all I had when I got off that stage. $17, and I'd already spent $4 on the boarding house. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he folded the bills carefully and put them in his shirt pocket. "I'll pay you back." "I don't want it back. We're married, aren't we? What's mine is yours." "That works both ways. What's mine is yours too, including the problems." "Then we'll handle them together." Something shifted in Caleb's face. Not quite a smile, but a softening. "Yeah, I guess we will." The next few weeks were brutal. Caleb and Luis worked from before dawn until after dark, vaccinating cattle, monitoring the herd, disposing of animals that had to be put down. Evelyn fell into a routine of keeping the house running, cooking big meals that Caleb could eat quickly, making sure there was always coffee ready, mending clothes that got torn on barbed wire. Rosa came by every few days, bringing food or just company. She taught Evelyn how to make tortillas, how to preserve vegetables, how to keep the house cool in the brutal afternoon heat. Slowly, carefully, they became friends. "You are good for him," Rosa said one afternoon while they were sitting on the porch snapping beans. "I'm not doing anything special. You are here. That is special." Rosa's hands moved quickly, efficiently. "After Martha died, he stopped living. He worked, he ate, he slept. But he was not alive, you understand? Now he is alive again. I see it." "We barely talk," Evelyn said. "We're like two people who happen to live in the same house." "That is how it starts. You build from there." "What if there's nothing to build on?" "We're strangers, Rosa. We got married because we were both desperate and alone." "That's not exactly a foundation for anything." Rosa smiled. "My mother, she used to say that love is like making bread. Sometimes you start with good ingredients and the bread still does not rise. Sometimes you start with almost nothing, and you make something beautiful. You do not know until you try." One evening, about a month after the wedding, Caleb came in earlier than usual. The cattle situation was finally under control. They'd lost 11 head total, which was bad but not devastating. The rest of the herd had been vaccinated and was showing no new signs of disease. He looked exhausted, but relieved. Think we're past the worst of it. That's good news. Yeah. He washed up at the sink. I appreciate everything you did, keeping things running here while I was dealing with all that. Made it easier knowing I didn't have to worry about the house, too. That's what I'm here for, isn't it? He turned to look at her. Is that all you're here for? The question hung in the air between them. Evelyn didn't know how to answer it. I don't know, she said finally. I thought it was, but it's getting harder to tell. Caleb dried his hands slowly. Yeah, me too. They ate supper in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Less awkward, almost comfortable. After the meal, Caleb did something he'd never done before. Instead of heading straight to his chair to read, he said, "Want to sit on the porch for a bit? Nights are finally cooling off." They sat in the wooden chairs Caleb had made years ago, watching the sun go down. The desert was beautiful this time of day, all purple and gold and shadows. Martha used to sit out here every evening, Caleb said. Said it was her favorite part of the day. I never understood it. I was always too tired or too busy. After she died, I couldn't stand to be out here. Reminded me too much of her. He paused. But sitting here now, it's different. How? I don't know exactly. It just is. They sat in silence for a while. Then Evelyn said, Samuel used to whittle. Every evening after supper, he'd sit in his chair and work on some little project, birds mostly. He'd give them to Thomas. After they both died, I couldn't look at birds without falling apart. I gave away all the ones Samuel had made because I couldn't stand having them in the house. You regret that now? Sometimes. Other times, I think it was the right thing to do. You can't move forward if you're drowning in the past. Is that what we're doing? Moving forward? I don't know. Maybe. She looked at him. Are we? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. I think so. Slowly. But yeah. The sky was full dark now, stars coming out one by one. A coyote howled somewhere in the distance. This is still strange, Evelyn said. Yeah. But it's not as strange as it was. No, it's not. They sat there until the night got cold, neither of them saying much. But when they finally went inside, something felt different. Like maybe they'd crossed some invisible line from strangers sharing a house to something else. Not love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But something. That something grew slowly, like a plant taking root in hard ground. Some days it felt like progress. Other days it felt like they were right back where they started. Two strangers who happened to share meals and a roof. The morning Evelyn found the box, she'd been looking for extra blankets in the upstairs closet. It was tucked in the back corner, covered with a layer of dust thick enough to write in. A wooden box about the size of a hat box, plain but well made. She shouldn't have opened it. She knew that, but her hands were already lifting the lid before her brain could stop them. Inside were letters, dozens of them, tied with faded ribbon. The handwriting on the envelopes was feminine, neat. She pulled one out and saw it was addressed to Caleb from Martha, dated from before they were married. Love letters. Evelyn closed the box quickly, her heart hammering. She shoved it back where she'd found it and grabbed the blankets she'd come for. But all day the box sat in her mind like something heavy. That evening, after supper, she couldn't hold it in anymore. I found a box today, in the upstairs closet. Caleb looked up from the harness he was mending. What kind of box? Letters. From your wife. I didn't read them, she added quickly. I just saw what they were and closed it. He set down the harness. His face had gone careful and blank. Oh, those. I'm sorry, I wasn't snooping. I was just looking for blankets. It's your house, too. You got every right to look in closets. He picked up the harness again, but didn't do anything with it. I should have gotten rid of those years ago. Why didn't you? Same reason you probably kept things from your husband. Hard to throw away the parts of someone you loved. He was quiet for a moment. You want me to get rid of them now? No. They're yours. Your memories. Evelyn sat down across from him. But it made me realize something. We're living in your house, sleeping in your rooms, using your things. There's nothing of me here except a trunk upstairs. What are you saying? I don't know exactly. She struggled to find the words. It's like I'm a guest who never leaves. I can't keep feeling like I'm visiting. Caleb set down the harness completely now. What do you need, to feel like it's your house too? I don't know that either. Maybe that's the problem. They sat in uncomfortable silence for a while. Finally, Caleb said, Martha had a garden out behind the house. After she died, I let it go to weeds. Couldn't stand to look at it. He cleared his throat. But if you wanted to do something with it, make it yours somehow. I wouldn't mind. Evelyn thought about this. She'd never been much of a gardener. That had been Margaret's skill, not hers. But the idea of having something that was hers, that she'd built with her own hands, appealed to her. I'll think about it, she said. The next morning, she went out to look at the garden plot. It was worse than she'd imagined. Completely overgrown with weeds and desert scrub, the fence falling down, whatever structure had been there long since rotted away. It would take weeks to make it usable again. She started anyway. Every morning after Caleb left for work, she spent a few hours out there, pulling weeds, clearing rocks. Her hands got blistered and her back ached, but she kept at it. Rosa came by one day and found her on her knees in the dirt, fighting with a particularly stubborn weed. You're making a garden? Trying to. Not sure I know what I'm doing. Rosa knelt down beside her and grabbed the weed, showing her how to get the roots. It's good you do this. The land, it needs tending, and you need something that is yours. That's what Caleb said. He is a smart man, sometimes. Rosa smiled. What will you plant? I have no idea. I'm not a gardener. Never was. Then you learn. I help you. Over the next few weeks, Rosa taught her the basics. What grew well in Arizona soil, when to water, how to protect plants from the brutal sun. They worked side by side, two women who'd both lost people they loved, both trying to figure out how to keep living anyway. Caleb didn't say much about the garden, but Evelyn noticed him watching sometimes from the porch. And one evening, she came out to find he'd repaired the fence and built a new gate. Didn't want animals getting in, he said when she thanked him. Waste of your work if a rabbit eats everything. Still, thank you. He shrugged and went back to whatever he'd been doing, but Evelyn saw the pleased look on his face. The first real fight happened in late August, 3 months after the wedding. It started over something stupid. Evelyn had moved some of Caleb's tools to clean the porch and forgotten to put them back exactly where they'd been. He came in looking for his good hammer and couldn't find it. Where's my hammer? I don't know. I moved some things yesterday. It's probably in the shed. Why'd you move them? Because they were in the way. I was trying to sweep. You could have asked me first. Something in his tone made Evelyn's spine go stiff. Asked your permission to clean the porch? To move my tools. I keep them where I keep them for a reason. Well, maybe if you didn't leave them scattered all over the place, I wouldn't have to move them. It's my porch. It's our porch. You said this was my house too. I meant... He stopped, frustration clear on his face. Never mind, forget it. No, say what you meant. I meant you live here, but it's still my ranch, my place. I've been doing things a certain way for 40 years, and I don't need someone coming in and changing everything around. Evelyn felt something cold settle in her chest. I see. So I'm here to cook and clean and keep you company, but don't actually change anything. Is that it? That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Caleb grabbed his hat. I'm going to find my hammer. He slammed the door on his way out. Evelyn stood in the kitchen, shaking with anger and something else she didn't want to name. Hurt, maybe. The realization that she'd been fooling herself thinking this was becoming something real. She went upstairs to her room and sat on the bed. Through the window, she could see Caleb in the shed, moving things around roughly, clearly still angry. After a while, he found the hammer and stalked off toward the barn. Evelyn didn't go down for supper. She wasn't hungry, and she didn't want to see him. She heard him come in around sunset, heard him moving around in the kitchen. He called up the stairs once. Evelyn, you coming down? She didn't answer. After a moment, she heard his footsteps retreat. She lay in bed fully clothed, watching the light fade from the sky. This had been a mistake. The whole thing. You couldn't build a life with someone based on loneliness and convenience. You couldn't make a marriage out of nothing. Around 9 o'clock, there was a soft knock on her door. Evelyn, can I come in? Door's not locked. Caleb opened the door slowly. He stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands, looking uncomfortable. I'm sorry. What I said earlier about it being my ranch, that was wrong. Was it? It is your ranch. No, it's our ranch, our home. You were right to call me on that. He shifted his weight. I've been alone so long I forgot how to share space with someone. Forgot that another person means things change. I shouldn't have snapped at you over a damn hammer. Evelyn sat up. I should have put your tools back where I found them. You were trying to clean, nothing wrong with that. He paused. Truth is, it scared me a little. Seeing you making changes, making the place yours. It felt like I was losing Martha all over again. I'm not trying to replace her. I know that. Up here. He tapped his head. But getting the rest of me to understand it takes longer. He looked at her directly. I don't want you to leave. If that's what you're thinking, I know we had a deal. You can go whenever you want, but I'm asking you to stay. Why? Because this place is better with you in it. I'm better with you in it. And yeah, we fight sometimes. That's what people do when they live together. But I'd rather fight with you than eat supper alone every night. Evelyn studied his face. He meant it. She could see that. I'd rather fight with you too, she admitted. Which is strange because 3 months ago, I didn't even know you existed. 3 months ago, I was waiting to die. Now I'm not. He managed a small smile. That's worth putting up with Move Tools. Come here, Evelyn said. He stepped into the room cautiously. She stood up and did something she hadn't done since the wedding day. She hugged him. It was awkward at first, neither of them sure where to put their arms, but then Caleb hugged her back and it felt right, like two broken pieces that almost fit together. We're going to be okay, he said quietly. Yeah, I think we are. They pulled apart and stood there for a moment, both a little embarrassed. Then Caleb cleared his throat. There's stew on the stove if you're hungry. I could eat. They went downstairs together. The stew was barely warm, but they ate it anyway, sitting across from each other at the kitchen table. Outside, the desert night was full of sounds, coyotes, wind, the creaking of the house settling. You know what's strange? Evelyn said. I feel more at home here after 3 months than I did in Philadelphia after 40 years. Why do you think that is? I don't know. Maybe because I chose this. Everything else in my life just happened to me. But this, marrying you, coming here, this was my choice. Maybe that makes the difference. Caleb nodded slowly. I never thought about it like that. But you're right. I chose this too. First time in a long time I chose something instead of just letting life happen. After supper, they sat on the porch like they'd started doing most evenings. The stars were out in force, the air finally cool enough to breathe. Evelyn thought about the fight earlier, about how scared she'd been that everything was falling apart. But it hadn't fallen apart. They'd worked through it. That meant something. Tell me about your son, Caleb said suddenly. Thomas. What was he like? It was the first time he'd asked her to talk about her past. Usually, they both avoided it, like their lives before this moment didn't matter. But maybe they needed to matter. Maybe you couldn't build something new without acknowledging what you'd built before. He was quiet, Evelyn said. Thoughtful. He loved books, which drove Samuel crazy because he wanted Thomas to be a carpenter like him. But Thomas's hands were too clumsy for fine work. He was always cutting himself or hitting his thumb with the hammer. She smiled at the memory. He wanted to be a teacher, was studying for it when he got sick. Must have been hard, watching him die young like that. It was the worst thing I've ever lived through. Worse than losing Samuel, if I'm being honest. You're not supposed to bury your children. Her voice cracked a little. Some days I still can't believe he's gone. I'll think of something I want to tell him, and then remember. Caleb reached over and took her hand, just held it, not saying anything. They sat like that for a while, hands linked, both thinking about all the people they'd loved and lost. Martha couldn't have children, Caleb said, eventually. We tried for years. After a while, we stopped trying and just accepted it would be the two of us. She pretended it didn't bother her, but I'd catch her sometimes looking at other people's kids with this expression. He trailed off. I think that's why she threw herself into that garden. Needed something to nurture, I guess. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. He squeezed her hand once and let go. But it left a hole. I think we both spent 40 years with that hole inside us, pretending it wasn't there. The conversation drifted to other things after that. The cattle, the garden, Luis's oldest daughter, who was getting married in the fall. Easy things, safe things. But something had shifted between them. They'd let each other see the scars, and neither had looked away. September came with slightly cooler days, and the first hints that summer might eventually end. Evelyn's garden was actually producing now. Tomatoes, squash, some herbs. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She'd built it from nothing and kept it alive through the brutal heat, and that felt like an accomplishment. One morning, Rosa came by looking agitated. "My daughter Sophia, she is sick. Fever, bad cough. I need to take her to the doctor in Red Hollow, but Luis took the wagon to buy supplies and won't be back until tonight." "Take our wagon," Evelyn said immediately. "Caleb won't mind." "You sure?" "Positive. Go. I'll explain to Caleb." After Rosa left with Sophia, Evelyn went to find Caleb. He was fixing a broken section of fence on the east pasture. When she explained what happened, he just nodded. "You did right. Rosa would do the same for us." "I didn't even think to ask you first." "Why would you? It's your wagon, too." He hammered in another fence post. "Besides, you got good instincts. I trust your judgment." Such a small thing, but it made Evelyn ridiculously happy. He trusted her enough to make decisions without checking with him first. That was marriage, she realized. Not the ceremony or the shared name, but the trust that built up slowly over time. That evening, Rosa came back with Sophia, who had medicine and was already looking better. She thanked Evelyn profusely, insisted on bringing over dinner the next night as payment. Caleb tried to tell her it wasn't necessary, but Rosa wouldn't hear it. "You help family," Rosa said firmly, "and you are family now." After she left, Caleb looked at Evelyn. "You know what that means, right? We're stuck with them now. Rosa decides you're family. There's no escaping it." "I don't want to escape it." "Good. Me neither." The wedding Rosa's daughter had in October was bigger than anything Evelyn had seen in years. Half the territory seemed to show up. There was music and dancing and food enough to feed an army. Caleb and Evelyn sat at one of the long tables, watching people celebrate. "You want to dance?" Caleb asked suddenly. Evelyn stared at him. "You dance?" "Used to. Been a while, but I probably remember how." He stood up and offered his hand. "Come on, before I lose my nerve." They joined the other couples on the makeshift dance floor. Caleb was rusty, and Evelyn hadn't danced in 15 years, but they managed a clumsy waltz that made them both laugh. "We're terrible at this," Evelyn said. "Awful. People are probably staring." "Let them stare." They danced 3 more songs, getting slightly better each time. When the music finally stopped, they were both breathing hard and grinning like fools. "That was fun," Caleb said. "It was." They sat back down and Rosa appeared with 2 glasses of wine. "You two look happy." "We are," Caleb said. And Evelyn realized it was true. She was happy. When had that happened? On the way home that night, riding in the wagon under a sky full of stars, Caleb said, "I need to tell you something." Evelyn's stomach tightened. Nothing good ever started with those words. "What?" "I'm falling in love with you." She turned to look at him, sure she'd heard wrong. "What?" "I know we said this wasn't about love, that we were just 2 people helping each other out. But somewhere along the way, that changed. For me, anyway." He kept his eyes on the road. "You don't have to feel the same way. I'm not asking you to. I just needed to say it out loud because keeping it inside was eating me up." Evelyn's heart was hammering. "Caleb, you don't have to say anything. I know this wasn't part of the deal." "Will you shut up for a minute and let me talk?" He shut up. "I'm falling in love with you too," Evelyn said. The words felt strange in her mouth, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. "I didn't mean to. I wasn't looking for it. But it happened anyway." Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop. They were in the middle of nowhere, nothing but desert and darkness around them. He turned to face her. "You mean that?" "Yes." "You're sure?" "Because I'm old and set in my ways and probably a pain in the ass to live with. I'm sure, yeah." He kissed her then. It was awkward and unpracticed, nothing like the passionate kisses she'd shared with Samuel when they were young. But it was real. It was theirs. And it made Evelyn feel something she thought she'd never feel again. Wanted. Loved. When they pulled apart, they were both shaking a little. "Well," Caleb said, "that happened." "It did. We probably should have done that months ago." "Probably." They sat there for a moment, both processing what had just changed between them. Then Caleb picked up the reins. "We should get home." "Yes." But he reached over and took her hand first, lacing their fingers together. They rode the rest of the way like that, hands linked, neither of them saying much. There wasn't much that needed saying. When they got home, Evelyn didn't go upstairs to her room. She followed Caleb to his room off the kitchen, and they lay down together in the bed he'd once shared with Martha. It felt right, like this was where she belonged. "Is this okay?" Caleb asked. "I don't want to rush anything." "We've been married 6 months. I don't think this counts as rushing." He laughed. "Fair point, fair." They lay there in the darkness, still fully clothed, just holding each other. Neither of them was looking for passion. They were too old and too tired for that. But the closeness, the comfort of another body next to yours in the dark, that was what they needed. "I never thought I'd have this again," Evelyn whispered. "Me neither." "Are we crazy? Two old people falling in love?" "Probably, but I don't care." "Me neither." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Inside, two people who'd been alone for so long, they'd forgotten what it felt like to be whole, finally found their way to each other. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the grand romance of storybooks, but it was real, and it was theirs. And that was enough. The morning after felt different. Evelyn woke up to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and Caleb's arm across her waist. For a moment, panic fluttered in her chest. This wasn't her room. This wasn't her bed. And then she remembered. She'd chosen to be here. Caleb was already awake, watching her with those pale eyes of his. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning. You sleep okay?" "Better than I have in years." She touched his weathered face, traced the lines around his eyes. "You?" Same. He caught her hand and kissed her palm. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out this was all a dream, that you're not really here." "I'm here." "Yeah, you are." They lay there a while longer, neither wanting to break the spell. But eventually the day demanded attention. Cattle needed checking. Breakfast needed making. Life went on whether you wanted to stay in bed or not. Over coffee, Caleb said, "We should probably move your things down here, if you want to. No pressure." "I want to." Evelyn paused. "But maybe we could fix up that room a bit first. Make it feel like ours instead of just yours." "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know. New curtains, maybe. Clean out some of Martha's things. Only if you're ready," she added quickly. "I don't want to push." Caleb was quiet for a moment, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. "I'm ready. Been ready for a while, just didn't know how to do it alone. But with you, yeah, let's make it ours." They spent the next week slowly transforming the room. Evelyn washed the curtains and discovered they were beyond saving, so she and Rosa went into Red Hollow and bought new fabric. Rosa taught her how to sew simple panels. They weren't fancy, but they let in the right amount of light. Caleb built a new dresser for Evelyn's things and moved Martha's clothes out of the closet. He didn't throw them away. He gave them to Rosa, who knew women in town who could use them. But watching him fold his first wife's dresses and put them in a box, Evelyn saw how hard it was for him. "You don't have to do this all at once," she said. "Yes, I do. If I stop, I won't start again." He packed the last dress and closed the box. She'd understand. Martha was practical about death. She told me before she died not to turn the house into a shrine. Said I should keep living after she was gone. He looked at Evelyn. "Took me 11 years, but I'm finally listening." The new room felt lighter somehow, like they'd swept out the ghosts and made space for something new. When Evelyn moved her trunk downstairs and unpacked her few belongings, it felt right. She put the tintype of Samuel and Thomas on the dresser next to Caleb's picture of Martha, the dead and the living all sharing the same space. "That okay?" she asked, pointing to the photos. "I wasn't sure if you'd want—" "It's fine. They're part of us. No sense pretending they're not." Winter came early that year. By November, there was snow on the mountains and frost on the ground most mornings. Evelyn had never experienced a desert winter and was surprised by how cold it got. The house, built for keeping cool in summer, struggled to stay warm when the temperature dropped. Caleb spent days sealing gaps in the walls and making sure the fireplace drew properly. They started sleeping with extra blankets and keeping the fire going all night. On the worst nights, they'd wake up to find ice in the water pitcher. "This is brutal," Evelyn said one morning, her breath visible in the bedroom. "This is nothing. Wait till January." Caleb was already dressed. Layered in so many clothes, he looked twice his normal size. "I gotta check on the cattle. Make sure they got access to water. I'll come with you." "You don't have to. It's cold as hell out there." I know, but two people can work faster than one. They bundled up and headed out into a wind that cut like knives. The cattle were huddled together for warmth, their breath making clouds in the frozen air. Several of the water troughs had frozen over. Caleb and Evelyn spent 2 hours breaking ice and making sure every animal could drink. By the time they got back to the house, Evelyn couldn't feel her feet. Her hands were shaking so bad she couldn't unbutton her coat. Caleb had to help her, his own hands barely more functional. "That was stupid," he said. "I shouldn't have let you come." "You didn't let me, I chose to." Her teeth were chattering. "Besides, we got it done in half the time." "Still stupid." But he made her sit by the fire and rubbed her hands between his until the feeling came back. It hurt worse than the cold had, pins and needles shooting up her arms, but she didn't complain. That night Caleb's cough started. Just a small thing at first, barely noticeable, but by the next morning it was worse. By evening he was running a fever. "It's nothing," he insisted, "just a cold. You need to rest." "Can't rest. Got work to do." "The work can wait. Get in bed." They fought about it for an hour, Caleb insisting he was fine, Evelyn refusing to back down. Finally he gave in, more because he was too tired to keep arguing than because he agreed with her. The cold turned into something worse. For 3 days Caleb barely got out of bed. His fever spiked high enough that Evelyn started to panic. She made him drink water and broth, kept cold cloths on his forehead, sat up with him when he couldn't sleep. On the 4th day, she sent Luis into Red Hollow to fetch the doctor. "I don't need a doctor," Caleb protested weakly. "I don't care what you need. I'm getting one anyway." The doctor was a tired-looking man in his 60s who'd seen everything the frontier could throw at him. He examined Caleb thoroughly, listened to his chest, checked his pulse. "Pneumonia," he said finally. "Not terrible yet, but it could get there fast at his age. He needs rest, fluids, and warmth. Keep him in bed for at least a week. If the fever goes higher or he starts having trouble breathing, send for me immediately." After the doctor left, Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Caleb. He looked old suddenly, older than his years, fragile in a way that terrified her. "You're not allowed to die," she said. "Wasn't planning on it." "I'm serious. We just figured this out, you and me. You don't get to die now." He reached for her hand. "I'm not going anywhere. It's just pneumonia. I've had worse." "Have you?" "Well, no, but I'm too stubborn to die. You should know that by now." She wanted to laugh, but couldn't quite manage it. "You better be." For the next week, she barely left his side. Rosa brought food and helped with the house. Luis managed the ranch. Evelyn's whole world shrank down to that one room, that one bed, watching Caleb breathe and counting it as a victory every time he did. The fever broke on the 6th day. One moment he was burning up, the next he was drenched in sweat, and his forehead felt cool under her hand. Evelyn could have cried with relief. "I told you I wasn't going anywhere," Caleb said weakly. "You scared me." "Scared myself a little too, if I'm being honest." It took another week before he was strong enough to get out of bed for more than a few minutes at a time. By then it was December, and the ranch was buried under a foot of snow. Luis had been managing everything, but there was only so much one man could do. "I need to get back to work," Caleb said. "You need to finish recovering." "I'm recovered. I'm just weak. Only way to fix that is to start moving again." They compromised. He'd do light work around the house and barn, nothing strenuous. Luis would handle everything else until Caleb was back to full strength. It frustrated Caleb. He hated being useless. But he knew pushing too hard could land him right back in bed. Christmas came without much fanfare. They didn't have decorations or presents, but Rosa brought over tamales and Luis brought tequila, and they sat around the fire sharing stories and laughing. It was simple, but it was good. After everyone left, Evelyn and Caleb sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching snow fall in the moonlight. "This time last year I spent Christmas alone," Caleb said. "Ate beans from a can and went to bed at 7 because there was nothing else to do." "I spent it at Margaret's grave," Evelyn said. "She'd been dead 3 months, but I still couldn't quite believe it. I sat there in the cold telling her about my day like she could hear me." "That's sad as hell." "It was." She leaned against him. "But look at us now." "Yeah, look at us." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Caleb said, "I got you something for Christmas." "I thought we weren't doing presents." "We weren't, but I saw this in town when I went for supplies last month, and I couldn't not get it." He went inside and came back with a small wrapped package. Evelyn opened it to find a book, a beautiful leather-bound copy of poetry by Emily Dickinson. "You mentioned once you used to read poetry," Caleb said. "Before everything happened. Figured maybe you'd want to start again." Evelyn turned the book over in her hands, too moved to speak for a moment. "This is wonderful. Thank you." "You like it?" "I love it." She kissed him. "But now I feel bad. I didn't get you anything." "You gave me a reason to wake up in the morning. That's enough." January brought storms that dumped 3 feet of snow and kept them housebound for days at a time. The world outside became nothing but white and wind. Evelyn had never felt so isolated. Sometimes she'd stand at the window and see nothing but snow in every direction and wonder if they were the only people left on Earth. But Caleb was there, and Rosa and Luis would fight through the drifts every few days to check on them. They weren't alone. That made all the difference. One night, snowbound and restless, Caleb taught Evelyn how to play poker. They used dried beans for betting and played hand after hand while the wind howled outside. "Where'd you learn to play?" Evelyn asked. "Cattle drives when I was young. Long nights sitting around a campfire, not much else to do." He dealt another hand. "I was terrible at first. Lost a month's wages before I figured out what I was doing. And now? Now I'm pretty good." He grinned. "You're about to find out how good." He wasn't bluffing. He cleaned her out in 5 hands. "You hustled me," Evelyn said. "I did, but it's just beans." "Still, that's my bean fortune you took." They played until midnight, laughing and talking and forgetting about the storm outside. When they finally went to bed, Evelyn realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd had that much fun doing something so simple. February brought a thaw, and with it, mud that swallowed everything. The road to town became impassable. Supplies started running low. Caleb talked about riding in for basics, but the mud was deep enough to bog down a horse. "We'll make do," Evelyn said. "We got flour and beans and some vegetables left in the root cellar. We won't starve. Might get sick of beans, though. We're already sick of beans. 1 more week won't kill us." She was wrong about that. By the end of the week, they were both so tired of beans they could barely stand to look at them. But they survived. And when the road finally dried enough for Luis to make it to town, they celebrated like he'd brought back treasure instead of coffee and salt pork. Spring came slowly, reluctantly. The snow melted in patches, leaving the land brown and muddy and ugly. But underneath all that mud, things were starting to grow. Evelyn's garden, which she'd worried wouldn't survive the winter, started showing green shoots. "Look at that," she said, kneeling in the wet earth. "It made it." Caleb knelt beside her. "You made it. You kept it alive." "We kept it alive." She looked at him. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Sure you could have. You're tougher than you think." "Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out." They worked the garden together that day, pulling weeds and checking each plant. It was muddy and cold, and their knees ached from kneeling, but it felt good. Felt like hope. Like they were preparing for a future that might actually be worth living. That night, Caleb's cough came back. Just a tickle at first, but Evelyn recognized it immediately. The same cough that had nearly killed him in December. "No," she said firmly. "Absolutely not. You're not getting sick again." "I'm fine. It's nothing." "That's what you said last time." But this time he was right. It was just a cough from working in the cold air. It went away after a few days and didn't come back. Evelyn still watched him like a hawk, listening for any sign the fever was returning, but it never did. "You can stop worrying," Caleb said one morning. "I'm healthy as a horse." "You're 70 years old and you had pneumonia 4 months ago. I'm going to worry." "Fair enough, but I'm okay. Really." By April, the ranch was coming back to life. Calves were being born. The grass was turning green. The whole world felt new again, washed clean by winter. One evening, Evelyn and Caleb rode out to check on a section of fence on the far side of the property. The sun was setting, turning everything gold and red. They sat on their horses side by side, looking out over land that stretched forever. "You ever regret it?" Caleb asked. "Saying yes that night in Red Hollow?" Evelyn thought about the question seriously. "No, not once." "You?" "Never." He turned to look at her. "I love you. I know I said it before, but I need to say it again. I love you." "I love you too." They'd said the words before, but somehow this time felt different, more certain, like they'd both finally stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop and accepted that this was real. We should probably head back, Caleb said. Getting dark. In a minute. Evelyn wanted to hold on to this moment a little longer. The two of them together, watching the sun go down, everything perfect for just this one slice of time. Eventually, they rode back to the house. The lights were on. Rosa had brought over supper and left it warming on the stove. They ate together, talked about plans for the coming months, went to bed in each other's arms. It was ordinary, simple, exactly the kind of life Evelyn had thought was over for her. But here it was anyway. May brought heat, and with it, the realization that they'd been married almost a year. Evelyn couldn't quite believe it. A year ago, she'd been sitting in the dust beside a water trough with nowhere to go and nothing left. Now she had a home, a husband, friends, purpose. We should do something, she said one morning, to mark the occasion. Like what? I don't know, something special. They settled on a picnic. Rosa helped Evelyn pack a basket of food. Caleb borrowed Luis's good wagon, and they drove out to a spot by a creek that ran through the property. It was shaded by cottonwoods and peaceful in a way the ranch house never was. They spread out a blanket and ate fried chicken and potato salad and biscuits with honey. After eating, they lay side by side looking up through the leaves at the sky. This is nice, Evelyn said. It is. I'm happy. Is that strange? At my age, after everything I've lost, I didn't think I'd ever be happy again. Not strange, just lucky. Caleb rolled onto his side to look at her. We're both lucky. Could have gone the other way easy enough. But it didn't. No, it didn't. He kissed her there by the creek with the sound of water running over rocks and birds singing in the trees. It was the kind of moment you wanted to bottle up and keep forever, but those moments never lasted. All you could do was appreciate them while they were happening. They stayed by the creek until evening, talking about everything and nothing. About the past year. About the years before. About what might come next. Neither of them had many years left, they knew that. But however much time they had, they'd spend it together. On the ride home, Evelyn said, "Thank you." For what? For seeing me that night. For asking me an impossible question. For giving me a reason to keep living. I should be thanking you. You saved my life much as I saved yours. Then we're even. Yeah, I guess we are. That night, lying in bed with Caleb's arm around her, and the desert wind singing through the eaves, Evelyn thought about all the choices that had led her here, leaving Philadelphia, getting on that stage to Red Hollow, sitting by that water trough instead of staying in her room, saying yes to a stranger's proposal. Any one of those choices could have gone differently, and if they had, she'd be somewhere else right now, probably dead or dying in some anonymous place where nobody knew her name. But she'd made those choices, and they'd brought her here, to this bed, this man, this life. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It wasn't even the life she'd wanted. But somehow, impossibly, it had become the life she needed. The second year was easier in some ways, harder in others. They knew each other now, knew which silences were comfortable and which meant trouble brewing, knew when to push and when to let things be. But knowing someone also meant seeing their flaws up close, and there were days when those flaws grated like sandpaper. Caleb had a stubborn streak a mile wide. Once he decided something, changing his mind was like trying to move a boulder with your bare hands. Evelyn learned this the hard way when she suggested selling off some of the older cattle to buy a new bull for breeding. The herd's getting weak, she said one evening, showing him the numbers she'd been tracking. Look at the calf weights this year compared to last. We need fresh bloodlines. We don't need anything except to keep doing what we've been doing. What you've been doing isn't working anymore. The market's changing. People want bigger cattle. People want what I give them, or they can buy from someone else. They fought about it for a week, the same argument in circles. Finally, Evelyn stopped talking about it altogether. She went to Luis instead. He won't listen, she said. Luis shrugged. The boss? He is like this. Always has been. You cannot push him. You have to let him think it was his idea. How do I do that? You plant the seed, then you wait. Evelyn hated waiting, but she did it anyway. She left articles about cattle breeding where Caleb would see them. She mentioned casually what other ranchers were doing. She didn't say another word about the bull. 3 weeks later, Caleb came in from town and said, I've been thinking about what you said, about the bull. Oh? Might be you're right. Might be time to bring in some new blood. Evelyn bit her tongue to keep from saying she'd told him so. That sounds like a good idea. They bought the bull in June. Caleb pretended he'd come to the decision on his own. Evelyn let him pretend. That was marriage too, she was learning, picking your battles and letting the small victories go. But for every frustration, there were moments that made it all worthwhile. Like the morning Caleb brought her coffee in bed just because. Or the evening she found him reading the poetry book he'd given her, trying to understand why she loved it. Or the 100 small kindnesses they showed each other without thinking about it. Summer brought drought. The creek that ran through the property slowed to a trickle, then dried up completely. The grass turned brown and brittle. Cattle started losing weight. Every rancher in the territory was struggling, but that didn't make it easier. Caleb spent long hours hauling water from the deep well to the troughs. He came in every night exhausted and discouraged. Evelyn did what she could, kept the house running, made sure he ate, reminded him that they'd survived worse. Have we? He asked one particularly bad night. Some days I'm not so sure. We survived last winter. We survived the blackleg. We'll survive this too. You got a lot of faith for someone who's seen as much loss as you have. It's not faith. It's stubbornness. I refuse to let this desert beat us. He smiled tiredly. Remind me never to bet against you. The drought broke in August with storms so violent they flooded the dry creek and turned the ranch roads to rivers. It was too much water too fast, but at least it was water. The grass came back. The cattle fattened up. By September, things were almost normal again. That fall, Luis's daughter Sophia came by to ask Evelyn for help. She was 18 now, engaged to be married, and terrified. I do not know how to be a wife, she confessed. My mother, she tries to tell me, but I do not understand. How do you make it work? How do you live with someone forever? Evelyn thought about the question carefully. You don't figure it out all at once. You just wake up every day and decide to keep trying. Some days are easy. Some days you want to walk out and never come back. But if you really love them, you stay. You work through the hard parts. But what if I make mistakes? You will make mistakes. So will he. That's part of it. The trick is forgiving each other and not keeping score. Sophia looked at her with wide eyes. You make it sound so hard. It is hard. Anyone who tells you different is lying. Evelyn paused. But it's also the best thing I ever did. Marrying Caleb saved my life in more ways than one. After Sophia left, Evelyn sat on the porch thinking about her own words. 2 years ago, she'd been ready to die. Now she was giving advice about marriage to a girl young enough to be her granddaughter. Life was strange. Caleb came out and sat beside her. What are you thinking about? How far we've come? How different everything is now? Better different or worse different? Better. Definitely better. He took her hand. They sat like that until the stars came out. Not talking, just being together. It was enough. The third year started with Caleb's 72nd birthday in January. Evelyn made his favorite meal, roast beef with potatoes and carrots from the root cellar. Rosa brought over a cake. Luis gave him a new pair of work gloves. It was simple, but it mattered. Caleb hadn't celebrated his birthday in years. I'm getting old, he said that night. We're both getting old. No, I mean really old. My knees hurt every morning. My back goes out if I lift anything heavy. I can't work like I used to. So we adjust. We hire more help. We do things differently. I hate being weak. Evelyn understood that. She felt it too. The way her hands shook sometimes, the way stares left her breathless, the way her memory slipped when she was tired. Aging was cruel. It took everything slowly, piece by piece, until you barely recognized yourself. You're not weak, she said firmly. You're just not 20 anymore. There's a difference. But she saw the worry in his eyes, the fear that he'd become a burden, that his body would fail before his mind was ready to quit. It was the same fear she carried. In February, Caleb fell. He was fixing a fence and his knee gave out and he went down hard on the frozen ground. He tried to get up and couldn't. Luis found him 20 minutes later and had to help him back to the house. The doctor said it was a bad sprain, nothing broken, but Caleb needed to stay off it for at least a week. That meant bed rest. That meant being dependent on others. That meant everything Caleb hated. He was a terrible patient, cranky and impatient and impossible to please. Evelyn nearly lost her temper a dozen times, but she bit it back. She knew he wasn't angry at her. He was angry at his body for betraying him. "I can't do this," he said one afternoon. "Can't just lie here while everyone else does my work." "You don't have a choice. That knee needs time to heal." "I don't have time. Ranch doesn't run itself. Luis is handling it. Everything's fine." "It's not fine. Nothing's fine." Evelyn set down the book she'd been reading. "What's really bothering you?" He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "I'm scared that I'm going to end up completely useless, that you're going to have to take care of me like a child, that I'm going to die slow and take you down with me." "Stop it. It's true. You saw what happened with my wife. The cancer ate her alive for 2 years. I had to watch her waste away, had to do everything for her toward the end. I don't want that for you. I don't want you to have to... I said, "Stop it." Evelyn's voice was sharp enough to cut. "I was there when my husband died. I was there when my son died. I know what it looks like when someone you love leaves you piece by piece. And you know what? I'd do it again if I had to, because that's what love is. It's not just the good parts. It's all of it. You shouldn't have to. Neither should you, but if it happens, we'll deal with it together, just like we've dealt with everything else." Caleb looked at her with eyes that were suddenly wet. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." He laughed, which turned into a cough, which made him wince because it hurt his knee. But something had loosened between them. The fear was still there, but it wasn't choking them anymore. The knee healed slowly. By March, Caleb was moving around again, though he limped badly and couldn't do heavy work. He hated every minute of it, but he learned to accept help. That was growth, Evelyn thought. Learning that needing someone didn't make you weak. Spring came with a surprise. Rosa's son Miguel, who'd been working on a ranch in California, came home and asked if he could work for Caleb. He was young and strong and knew cattle. It meant they could afford to slow down a little. "You should hire him," Evelyn said. Caleb hesitated. "That's another salary to pay." "We can afford it, and you need the help. We both know you do." He hired Miguel. It changed everything. Suddenly, Caleb wasn't working dawn to dusk every day. He could take mornings slow, could sit on the porch with his coffee and actually enjoy it, could spend time with Evelyn instead of collapsing into bed exhausted every night. One evening, they took a ride out to the far pasture just to watch the sunset. They hadn't done that in months, maybe years. The sky turned orange and pink and purple, and the whole world felt peaceful. "I could get used to this," Caleb said. "You should. You've earned it." "Feels like giving up, though." "It's not giving up. It's being smart. There's a difference." They rode back in the gathering dark, taking their time, in no hurry to get anywhere. When they got home, the house was warm and welcoming. Rosa had left supper in the oven. Everything was taken care of. "This is good," Caleb said quietly. "This life we built. I don't tell you that enough, but it's good." "It is," Evelyn agreed. That summer was the best they'd had. The rains came at the right time. The grass grew thick and green. The cattle thrived. The new bull was producing strong calves. Everything Evelyn had predicted came true, though she was gracious enough not to mention it. They celebrated their 3rd anniversary with another picnic by the creek. Rosa packed them enough food for an army. Luis made sure all the work was covered so they could take the whole day. 3 years, Evelyn said, lying on the blanket with her head on Caleb's shoulder. Feels like longer somehow. In a good way or a bad way? Good. Like we've always been together. Like that time before doesn't even count. I know what you mean. Sometimes I try to remember what it was like before you, and I can't quite get there. It's like looking at someone else's life. They were quiet for a while, listening to the water and the birds and the wind in the cottonwoods. Then Caleb said, "I want to make this official." "What do you mean? We're already married." "I mean the ranch. I want it in your name too, legal-like. So if something happens to me, there's no question." Evelyn sat up. "Caleb, I mean it. We built this together. You got as much right to it as I do. More, maybe, because you made it worth having again. Nothing's going to happen to you." "You don't know that. I'm 72, Evelyn. I'm on borrowed time as it is. I want to make sure you're taken care of." They went to Red Hollow the next week and saw a lawyer. The paperwork was simple enough. The ranch was now in both their names. If Caleb died, it went to Evelyn. If they both died, It would be sold and the money donated to help widows in the territory. That's a good legacy, Evelyn said on the ride home. Helping women who got left behind. Figured we both know what that feels like. Might as well do some good with it. Fall came with its usual work. Harvesting the garden, preparing for winter, making sure the cattle were ready for cold weather. But this year felt different, less desperate. They had help now. They had systems in place. They knew what to expect. In November, Rosa came by looking worried. Luis, he is having chest pains. He will not see the doctor, says it is nothing. Evelyn knew that dance. I'll talk to him. She found Luis in the barn working on a saddle. Rosa says you're having pains. It's nothing, just old age. Luis, you're barely 55. That's not old age. That's your heart telling you something's wrong. I do not have time to be sick. You won't have time for anything if you drop dead. He looked at her, startled by her bluntness. Good. Men needed bluntness sometimes. I'm fine, he insisted. Samuel said that too. Right up until the day the mind collapsed on him. Thomas said it when he started coughing. They were both wrong. Don't make the same mistake. Luis was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. Okay, I will see the doctor. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. The doctor confirmed what Evelyn suspected. Luis's heart was struggling. He needed rest and medicine and less stress. He needed to stop working so hard. It was Miguel who came up with the solution. Papa, I can handle most of the work now. You supervise. Tell me what needs doing, but let me do the heavy lifting. It took some convincing, but Luis finally agreed. Like Caleb, he had to learn that accepting help wasn't weakness, that you could still have value even when you couldn't do everything yourself. Winter that year was mild. Some snow, some cold, but nothing like the brutal storms of that first year. Evelyn spent the quiet months reading, sewing, cooking things she'd never had time to try before. Caleb spent them teaching Miguel everything he knew about ranching. You're training your replacement, Evelyn observed one evening. Somebody's got to carry this on after we're gone. Might as well be someone who'll do it right. You planning on going somewhere? Not yet, but eventually. He looked at her seriously. I'm not scared of dying anymore. Used to terrify me. But now, I figure when it comes, it comes. Long as I got you beside me when it does, I'll be all right. What if I go first? Then I'll be right behind you. Can't imagine trying to do this alone again. It should have been morbid, talking about death like it was just another item on a list of things to handle, but somehow it wasn't. It was just reality. They were old. Time was running out. Might as well face it head on. Spring came again. Fourth spring together. The garden came back stronger than ever. Evelyn had learned what worked in this soil, this climate. She'd learned patience, learned to work with the land instead of against it. One morning she was out there pulling weeds when she realized she was happy. Not just content or comfortable, but actually happy. When was the last time she could say that? Before Samuel died? Before Thomas? Maybe never. She stood up, brushed dirt off her hands, and looked around. The house in the distance, the mountains beyond, the endless sky. This was home. Not just a place she lived, but home in the deepest sense. That evening she told Caleb what she'd realized. I'm glad, he said simply. You deserve to be happy. So do you. I am. Have been for a while now. They sat on the porch watching the sunset like they did most evenings. The routine of it was comforting. The predictability. After so many years of chaos and loss, boring was beautiful. In June, Caleb started having trouble breathing. Just a little at first, easily dismissed. But it got worse. By July, he was winded after walking across the yard. The doctor came and listened to his chest, and his face got grave. Your heart's not pumping like it should. You need to take it easy, real easy. How easy? No work, lots of rest. If you push it, you could have a heart attack. Caleb took the news stoically, but Evelyn saw the fear in his eyes that night. This is it, isn't it? The beginning of the end. We don't know that. Yes, we do. I'm 73. My heart's giving out. There's no coming back from this. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to insist he'd be fine, but she couldn't. He was right. They both knew it. Then we make the most of whatever time is left, she said. And they did. Caleb couldn't work, but he could sit on the porch, could talk to Miguel about the ranch, could spend afternoons with Evelyn reading or just being together. The days got slower but also richer somehow. Every moment mattered because they both knew the moments were numbered. August came hot and dry. Caleb spent most of his time in the shade, too tired to do much else. But he wasn't in pain. That was something. He could still laugh, still talk, still be himself, even if his body was failing. One evening, he said, "I need you to promise me something." "What?" "When I'm gone, don't give up on this place. Keep the ranch running, keep living. Don't do what I did after Martha died." "I won't. Promise me." "I promise." He squeezed her hand. "Thank you. For everything, for saying yes that night, for sticking it out even when it was hard, for loving me when I thought I was done being loved." "Right back at you." They sat in silence for a while. Then Caleb said quietly, "I'm tired, Evelyn." She knew what he meant. Not tired like needing sleep, tired like ready to stop. "I know. I don't want to leave you." "I know that too. But I'm not scared anymore. That's because of you. You made dying less frightening. You did the same for me." He died 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep. Evelyn woke up and he was gone. Just like that. No drama, no long goodbye. One moment he was there, the next he wasn't. She sat with him for a long time before calling Luis, let herself feel the grief without trying to manage it. She'd lost people before. She knew how this went. The wave would crash over her and eventually she'd surface. But right now she let herself sink. They buried him on the property, on a hill overlooking the ranch he'd built. Half the territory came to the funeral. People Evelyn didn't even know, all with stories about how Caleb had helped them, or given them advice, or just been a steady presence in an unstable world. Rosa held her hand through the whole thing. "He loved you very much." "I know. You gave him 4 good years, that matters. 4 years isn't enough." "No, but it is more than nothing." After everyone left, Evelyn stood alone at the grave. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors Caleb had loved. She thought about that night in Red Hollow, about the desperate old woman sitting in the dust and the desperate old man who'd asked an impossible question. They'd saved each other. It was as simple and as complicated as that. She didn't cry. She'd cried enough when Samuel died, when Thomas died. This grief was different, quieter. It sat in her chest like a stone, but it wasn't crushing her. Because alongside the grief was gratitude. Gratitude for the 4 years they'd had. For the love that had grown between them. For the proof that life could still surprise you even at the end. The next morning she got up and went to work. Fed the chickens. Checked on the cattle. Talked to Miguel about plans for the fall. Life kept going whether she wanted it to or not. Rosa came by that evening. "How are you doing?" "I'm all right." "You do not have to be all right yet." "I know, but I will be. Eventually." And she was. Not right away. There were hard days when the loneliness felt like it would swallow her whole. When she'd turn to tell Caleb something and remember he wasn't there. When she'd wake in the night reaching for him and find only empty space. But there were good days too. Days when the ranch ran smoothly, when the cattle were thriving, when her garden produced more vegetables than she knew what to do with. Days when she felt capable and strong and alive. People in Red Hollow started calling her the Widow Mercer, but not in the pitying way they might have once. There was respect in it. She ran that ranch as well as Caleb had, maybe better in some ways. She made decisions, hired and fired, negotiated deals, earned the reputation of being tough but fair. Years passed. Evelyn got older. Her hair went completely white, her hands got more gnarled, her back bent a little more. But she kept going. She trained Miguel to take over eventually, the same way Caleb had trained him, made sure everything was set up so the ranch would continue long after she was gone, made sure the legacy they'd built together wouldn't die with her. Sometimes on quiet evenings, she'd sit on the porch in the same spot where she and Caleb used to sit. She'd watch the sun go down and think about everything that had happened, about loss and love and second chances, about how the end of one thing could be the beginning of something else. She'd think about that night in Red Hollow, about the question that changed everything, about choosing to say yes even when it made no sense. Best decision she ever made. When Evelyn finally died at 78, 15 years after marrying a stranger in a desperate town, she died in the house she'd made her own. Luis and Rosa were there. Miguel and his family, people who loved her. They buried her next to Caleb on that hill overlooking the ranch. Her headstone was simple. Evelyn Harper Mercer, 1863 to 1941, beloved wife. Below that, words she'd chosen herself years earlier. She said yes. The ranch continued under Miguel's care, thriving for another generation. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, people would see him sitting on the porch watching the sunset, and they'd think of the two old people who'd built this place from nothing but loneliness and luck, and the courage to ask impossible questions. The desert remembered them. The land remembered. And everyone who knew their story remembered the simple truth at its heart, that it's never too late to start over. That love doesn't have an age limit. That sometimes the craziest answer is the only one that makes sense. That saying yes, even when you're terrified, even when it makes no sense, even when you've lost everything and have nothing left to lose, sometimes saying yes is how you save your own life.